The night was thick with desert air, dry as bone and sharp with the smell of mesquite smoke, and the rancher's voice rolled across the saloon like a crack of thunder that dared anyone to challenge him, his laughter booming as he slammed his whiskey glass on the counter. "I give my ranch to whoever tames the giant Apaches," he roared, and the men inside, rough cowhands, drifters, gamblers, and two bounty hunters, broke into howls of laughter, some slapping the tables, others spitting tobacco into the sawdust-strewn floor, because everyone knew that taming Apaches was a death wish, and the words of the rancher, Old Man Harlan, were nothing more than a whiskey-soaked boast meant to draw amusement and applause, for his land sprawled across half the valley and his cattle numbered in the thousands, and no sane man would ever risk it against the fury of warriors who stalked the canyons like shadows carved from stone. Their chief, known as Tall Hawk, a figure whispered about in hushed tones, a man said to stand taller than any white man, broad-shouldered, fierce-eyed, whose very presence made men swallow hard and keep their rifles close. Yet in the far corner of the saloon, a young cowboy leaned silent, his hat brim drawn low, the smoke from his cheroot curling lazily upward, his eyes unreadable pools that did not flicker at the drunken boast nor join in the laughter. And though none noticed at first, when the rancher's words echoed for the third time, "I'll sign over my land to the fool who dares bring those savages to heel." The cowboy pushed back his chair slow as molasses, boots thudding soft against the planks, and the room grew quieter as men felt something shift, though no one could say what. He walked to the bar, every head turning now, the air tense, the laughter stilled, and he set his half-smoked cheroot down, looked Harlan dead in the eye, and spoke in a voice like gravel and iron, calm yet carrying weight enough to silence even the rowdiest drunk. "You've spoken big, old man. Maybe it's time someone called your bluff." For a heartbeat, no one moved, no one breathed, until Harlan's whiskey-blurred gaze sharpened as if struck by cold steel, and he barked a laugh, though weaker this time. "Boy, you don't know the devils you're talking about. Them Apaches ain't horses to be broke or cattle to be herded. They're killers, ghosts in the rocks. Every man who tried to tame them lies buried in shallow sand, picked clean by buzzards." The cowboy didn't blink, didn't smirk, only said, "Every wild thing's got a spirit. Some men understand that spirit, others die fearing it. You say your ranch goes to whoever tames the giant Apaches? Then you best get your pen ready." A murmur rippled through the saloon, disbelief mixed with awe, as the gambler with the diamond pin whispered, "Lord above, he's serious!" And a bounty hunter leaned to his partner and muttered, "Dead man walking." Yet Harlan, stung in his pride, puffed up his chest, slapped his palm on the bar, and shouted, "Done! You bring those red devils under your reign, and the Bar H Ranch is yours. I'll have the deed drawn in town, witnessed and sealed, so every man here will know I keep my word." The saloon erupted again, not in laughter but in chaos, voices shouting bets, men arguing if the boy was mad or touched by God, while the cowboy turned and walked for the swinging doors, not another word spoken, his shadow swallowed by the night outside. What no one knew, not yet, was the cowboy's past. For his name was Colton Reeves, a drifter who'd ridden from Texas to Dakota and back again, a man without kin, carrying ghosts heavier than the pistols on his hips, a man who had once lived among the very tribes men feared, learning their ways, their language, their spirit songs, and though he bore a white man's face, his heart beat with a rhythm the desert understood, and it was this rhythm that carried him toward the mountains where the giant Apaches ruled like kings of stone and sky. The following days saw whispers spread like wildfire. Townsfolk leaned over fences. Saloon girls whispered to one another in lamplight. And even the sheriff shook his head as word reached his ears. "That fool boy's gonna get himself skinned alive," he said. Yet a flicker of doubt touched his hardened eyes. For there had been something in Colton's gaze, something steady, unshaken, like a man who'd already measured death and found it wanting. Meanwhile, Colton rode alone, his horse a dappled Mustang with the scars of past battles, his saddle worn, his eyes scanning the horizon where mesas cut sharp against the sky. And as he rode, he recalled voices from another life, the chant of drums, the teaching of an old Apache elder who once spared his life when he was a half-starved runaway boy, teaching him that power lay not in breaking the wild, but in walking beside it. That memory guided him as he camped by dry riverbeds, as he tracked the faint signs of warriors moving through the land, an arrowhead left behind, a fire pit still warm beneath the ash, a feather caught in a thorn, bush, and each sign told him he was drawing, closer to Tall Hawk and his people. At night the coyotes cried, and the wind carried voices, whispers of fate and danger. And though fear would have gripped another man, Colton welcomed the test. For somewhere deep in him burned a fire that needed proving. And this challenge was more than land. More than gold, it was a reckoning with destiny itself. Back in town, old man Harlan sobered to regret, realizing too late that his boast, made in whiskey's grip, now had the weight of a binding oath. For men would hold him to it, and should Colton succeed, Harlan's empire would pass from his hands. He tried to laugh it off, to call the boy a fool who'd never return. Yet unease gnawed his belly, and he sent riders to follow, to see if the boy lived or fell, and perhaps to hasten his end if chance allowed. But fate had a way of weaving threads beyond the reach of mortal hands, and as Colton rode deeper into Apache land, a storm gathered, not of rain but of fire and blood. A storm that would test not only one cowboy's resolve, but the balance between two worlds, one of ranches and railroads, the other of spirits and stone. Days stretched into nights, and at last, upon a ridge painted red by the dying sun, Colton saw them, the figures of the giant Apaches, tall, proud, their spears gleaming, their eyes like hawks fixed upon him, and at their center stood Tall Hawk himself, his frame towering, his presence like thunder given flesh. And though any other man would have reached for his gun, Colton dismounted slow, hands open, voice steady as he spoke in the tongue the desert had once taught him. "I come not as an enemy, but as one who seeks to understand." A silence fell heavy, broken only by the cry of an eagle wheeling high above, and in that silence hung the weight of fate, of land, of blood, of promises made in jest yet now forged in steel. Whether Colton would be torn apart or granted a chance none before him had earned, that answer would shape not just his life, but the fate of the rancher, the town, and the Apaches themselves. And as night swept over the desert, the story's heart began to beat louder, pulling all who heard closer to its fire. And my friends, if you are drawn into this tale, if your heart quickens at the promise of what comes next, make sure you don't miss the unfolding of Chapter 2, where the test of man against legend, spirit against pride, reaches its breaking point. So hit that subscribe button now. Join our journey, and let's ride deeper together into the untamed wild.